to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8 figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley with the Business Blueprint, and this is part two of Dan and I talking about what we see going to happen in 2024 and what steps we think are most important to take to get over any bumps that may occur along the way. Last time we ended talking about data and looking at data, looking at trends, and going from there. And today I wanted to start talking about KPIs, key performance index, because one of the things Dan said last week that really piqued my interest was, we look at some data and it's the result of what happened, right? You look and you say, we got 10 new clients last month. Well, that's what happened from all of your marketing, all of your sales. The fact that you got 10 new clients is too late to do anything. If your goal was 20 and you wait till the end of the month and say, I got 10, it's too late. So that's the number of new clients is what's considered a lagging indicator. So Dan, I kind of wanted to go into the idea of KPIs and have you talk about, what are some leading indicators that you can look at in different areas so that you're not just stuck with the results at the end of the month.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, one of the things that you brought up reminded me of just a current issue. And I know when we have our listeners, they love listening to how we talk about what we're learning and what we're doing so they can apply it. And one of the things that you mentioned as far as a lagging indicator, the number of retained clients.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at our data and it wasn't matching up. And you pointed out and said, well, wait a second, we're not even on pace. We may not beat last month's.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started digging into it and come to find out that one of our managers had different numbers, then our director had different numbers, and the HubSpot who we used had different numbers. So it's like, okay, wait a second. Obviously, there's a breakdown somewhere. So what's going on? Because the manager had higher numbers than what I use to make decisions, or at least to look at some trends. And so it's going back to what we mentioned in the prior episode is, all right, so where is that breakdown in the process? Most likely it's one of our salespeople isn't putting in the retentions on a regular basis. So that's going to skew the numbers. If you have attorneys who don't bill contemporaneous, that's going to skew what you're looking at, yet alone affect the amount of revenue that you're potentially missing out on. And so I just wanted to point that out as a tip that, make sure that everyone is following the process, because if they're not, then that's going to skew the data, which is going to affect how you're reviewing it and potentially making business decisions. But we want to look at kind of what are we seeing if you're a company and you're doing some marketing and it's is your PPC working? Is your what's going on the digital side? How many people are visiting your website? How many people are calling in? How many people are actually scheduling appointments? And it doesn't matter if you're a law firm or what type of sales you're in. It all starts with getting that brand name out there. And what can we do to really get that brand name out there? And there's just so many opportunities in today's day and age to where a lot of focus has shifted from terrestrial, meaning radio, to more digital. And it just is a much better footprint for the company, but it's easier to reach a target audience as opposed to terrestrial, which can cost a lot of money at times, but then also you're just kind of blasting out there, but you're not necessarily zoning in or focusing on what your client avatar is, or who your ideal client would be. And then with the digital, you can really do what we would call some geofencing, which, okay, we want to get in this area with this type of client, or you don't even have to do that. You can just target certain demographics, age, and you can look at the amount of income that's coming in and the areas that they're living in. So it's really what we want to look at prospectively is come up with a game plan and figure out this is the strategy. Now, how are we going to execute it? And the strategy all begins with kind of mapping it out, right? That's going to be kind of your guide, but the guide's always going to change because we don't know what's really ahead. Going back to that last episode, looking into our crystal ball of next year. Okay, here's what I'm going to predict. We can never predict really what's going to happen, but we can forecast what we're talking about on the last episode. So it's really just trying to figure out what is that strategy that we're going to implement? How are we going to increase our brand name? How are we going to increase our visibility? And then execute. And then we need to look at, okay, what are we getting from that? Is our phones ringing? How often are they ringing? How many clients are we meeting with? How many are we retaining? Or how many sales are you potential prospects are you talking to or meeting with? How many of those are you closing? And what is the length of time between when you meet with them, when you close, whether it's, you're offering a service or you're selling a commodity, you still have to look at what are those times in between and what can we do to increase them. But as far as looking out prospectively, I always like to start with marketing.
Mhm. I agree 100%. Marketing is your leading indicator, right? If you're using digital, how many people came to your website? If you're using terrestrial, how many phone calls do we get? Everything allows you to pick a certain number now, a phone
Mhm.
number, so you can track how many phone calls you got from an advertising source. And then understanding of those phone calls or website visitors, how many of those turn into appointments? How many of those appointments actually show up? How many of the show up actually turn into clients? And how many new clients do you need to survive? Right. So
Right.
you say like my financial goals require me to have 100 clients a month, then I need to do the math backwards to get to how many website or phone call visitors I get.
Hmm.
You know, uh, Another thing that you talked about was even when times are good, paying attention to the levers. Tony Robbins is somebody I enjoy listening to talk, and he always says it's the companies that start during the winter that will do the best. The winter being tough times, are companies that start and then kind of go through a tough time pretty quickly because they're not too big at that point. But when you talk about pulling levers and which levers to pull and paying attention, I think it's so important to understand the reason that this is doing good is because we did this. And now we've created a repeatable thing. And we're looking at this lever and it's not doing so good. But right now, because everything else is doing so good, it covers up this problem. But if marketing fell, then maybe the operations side would be exploited more, right? Saying like, oh, if we have a fluctuation in operations, but our marketing is way up here, you're gonna miss this. So how do you, when times are good, have the discipline to take a step back and say, you know what, everything's going great. I am hitting all of my numbers, everything that was expected from me in my position. I'm killing it, but I can fix this. How do you have the discipline to do that?
Want to relish in the fact that we are trending in the right way and that we are meeting our goals or exceeding our goals. But I look at that as an opportunity to change the goals, because maybe the goal that you set when you were thinking about it may have been a challenge, but you've overcome that challenge. So now what's that next challenge? What can I do? I always like to say do better, right? So is what can I do better? Okay, so I'm meeting my goals. So let's move that goal line. Let's challenge ourselves. So we have that lever in place. We know what's working. So then let's use that to our advantage. But then what other levers may not be performing as good as that one lever? So we have an opportunity to look at, all right, what can we do to potentially change something or even eliminate an avenue that we've been using? Because if we're meeting our goals, what that could potentially do is cloud underperformers, whether it's an underperforming employee, which could be, you're meeting your hours overall for the firm and you're getting to your revenue, but you have attorneys who are carrying that weight, and you have these underperformers to where maybe they need some better coaching, or unfortunately there are some times when it just isn't a good fit. If you're in sales, you may have some sales people who are just killing it, and they're bringing in 80% of your revenue, to where the others are just barely getting by, or any type of business that you're in. So it's really looking in, okay, who are my revenue producers? And it doesn't matter what type of company you are. And that allows you to figure out, okay, how I need to look at the bottom and what can I do to help coach them up? Because we don't really want to try to coach them out, but at the same time, if there's an opportunity to provide better training, one of the things we mentioned in our other episode was investing in your employees. This could be a great opportunity as a company to look, okay, what can I do to provide additional training so we can not only better the employee, but then would increase productivity, which then increases revenue. So I always think when you're trending the wrong way, it's easy because okay, I have to look at this and I have to figure out what's going on. But when you're trending the right way and you're meeting everything or exceeding everything, a lot of companies and leaders just kind of sit back and enjoy that, and that's really the worst thing to do, in my opinion.
It is, and that's why I like that phrase. The best companies are made during the winter because they don't have the opportunity to sit back and enjoy that some things are being glossed over. They have to pay attention to every single lever. Every single thing has to be looked at. And another thing that you said earlier, when we talk about paying attention to these levers, when we talked about the data of the salespeople, is you understood the data so well because you looked at it that you knew that there was an anomaly within the data, and were able to go to your team and say, look, can you explain this anomaly to me? And then they understood how to go and suss out that anomaly. So, while getting the data is important, the most important thing is to look at the data, and actually look at it. It's weird how many people, how many platforms that we have that provide dashboards, that provide numbers, that provide information that we could use. And we just kind of gloss over that home screen and go to what we went into that specific platform to do and move on. So, how much of your time do you spend specifically just looking at data on a daily basis?
Probably too much because a lot of books and studies that I listen to and read say don't get caught up in too much in the weeds in the sense I'm looking at it on a daily basis. But I feel as leaders, we should just to keep a pulse on what's going on. Doesn't mean you're going to make any decisions based upon 1 or 2 or 3 days worth of data, but it's just getting an idea and just keep it involved on what's happening. Because at the on the other end, why I also like to check is just to make sure that my data is accurate and to make sure that everything that's being input, I'm getting the output that I want. Because sometimes things don't happen. There's an issue with the connection in the sense that the input into the data, something went awry. And so we want to look into that and see what's going on. Like the example I gave earlier, dealing with our own retentions, what's going on. Because if I would have just looked at it on a daily basis, I'm like, okay, well, I now know there's something happening. So I need to look into that side. But maybe there's another issue. So that's why I like to look at it on a daily basis, just to make sure that everything is still moving along. But then also, you mentioned KPIs earlier. One of our own internal KPIs for our attorneys is to bill contemporaneous for many reasons. I mean, one is there's a lot of studies out there that show if you don't bill with contemporaneous, depending upon the amount of time that lapses, you could be losing anywhere from 30 to 60% of your time. That's a lot of revenue that you're potentially missing out on for work that's already been done. So you're essentially doing pro bono work. And then the other reason why I like is because that allows us to make decisions. If we know that our attorneys and paralegals are entering their time in that day, then I can know, okay, here was the productivity for that day. Here's the productivity for that week. So if we need to make decisions, we can know that it's happening. Or if you're looking at the efficiency of an office, or like we use the word utilization of an employee, how busy they are, that allows us to kind of look in the future and forecast when do I need to potentially start hiring. And so just that's why I like the daily basis, because it's a good checks and balance, and it allows me an opportunity if I'm seeing maybe an employee that's not complying with our process or whatever your processes are, then you can speak to their manager, and it's just probably hopefully a simple conversation. But if not, that's also a good opportunity. Maybe someone's kind of checked out. So what do we need to do to stay ahead of anything to protect the firm or the company, but also going back to what we've been discussing in these episodes, just having those open communications with the employee to make sure that everything is okay. Because it's not always that they're interviewing someone. Maybe there's something internally happening, and we just want to be as compassionate and understanding as we can.
Oh, absolutely. And, that's why I like the data is, there's all this talk around quiet quitting. I'm not sure how much that actually affected or if it was just a cool headline, but, in my opinion, quiet quitting could probably be headed off by acknowledging the fact that somebody may have checked out, having a conversation with them. And like you said, more often than not, it's just been like, you know what, I'm actually having this hard time because of X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe
Right.
we can help that team member through that hard time. And, instead of letting it build up that now they're stressed because they didn't meet this metric, then they're stressed because they didn't meet that metric, then they're just kind of checked out waiting to get fired. We don't want that, and it might be, you know what, hey, I don't like this job. And we say, great, thank you for letting us know. Is there anything we can do to fix it? Nope. And you say, okay, what do you need from us to get moved on to your next position, your next goals in life? And, even in the manufacturing world, you talk about billing contemporaneous, in the manufacturing world, you want to know how much somebody produced during a day, any production-based position. If you're making steel tubing, you want to know how many feet ran on a particular project. And, for us, the contemporaneous billing also goes into like the manufacturing world, just in time manufacturing, right? If you put a bunch of steel tubing on the shop floor, it's going to rust. And, nobody needs it. You're just sitting there holding it, which was why, that you have all these Six Sigma ideas of just in time manufacturing, not holding more than you need, which is in the service based industry, billing when you have time to bill, so that we can look and we say, we're not holding more employees that we need. We actually have the right number of people producing what we need to produce.
Yeah.
Or we don't have people that are overloaded, that just aren't putting their time in, which is also probably one of the concerns that we have most, is not being able to identify when, a particular group of people have reached capacity and we need to add somebody to that team. Data relies on how accurately people put in numbers. How do you incentivize everybody across the organization to accurately put in their numbers?
I found for me the best way to do that is just to going back to what we've been talking about, just being open and honest on why do we need this data. Because I remember back when I was first managing and first getting into data, it took a while for me to understand. Then once it clicked for me, it was okay. This is why I need you guys to be able to put in your time or what you're doing, so I can look at it and make decisions that helps everybody. Because if you're coming to me, if you have an employee that says my team or I'm overworked or I'm feeling really stressed. Okay, well, let's see what the data shows. Oh, well, I'm not seeing that you're billing a lot or that your team isn't producing a lot or you're not selling a lot. What talk to me about this. So that's why it's important to make sure that you're inputting everything and as quickly as you can. And of course, life happens, meeting happens, and we know that can't just be contemporaneous in the sense of right afterwards, but make sure you're tracking it. And I always advise all team members, do not leave for the end of the day unless you know that everything you've done has been accounted for and tracked, because that allows you to know that, okay, I've checked everything off. I can go home, that we're getting the best out of our people.
Yeah, exactly right. Data is, it even shortens conversation. So when I talk to people, I always talk about efficiency. That is one of my annoying traits. I get it. I try to get from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible. And I know that rubs people the wrong way, but I'm like, look, if you put this here, you don't have to talk to me. And they're like, well, maybe I want to talk to you. I'm like, oh, well, it's not very efficient. um, I love having a conversation, but it's like, but I wouldn't need to talk to you. I don't need to waste your time. Not everybody looks at having to talk to somebody as a waste of time. It's not, but I've tried many different ways to encourage people. Look, if you put the data here, I might be able to see the problem before you can, right?
Mhm.
Like I might actually notice a trend. Or if you're going out of town, you say, hey man, I'm going out of town. And then I see the data and I don't question it. I know we kind of got off. We started talking about what we foresee in 2024, and the direction that we went is how we accomplish anything for no matter what we see, right? So if we see maybe a possible downturn in the economy, it's going to be data that lets us know before that downturn gets here. It's going to be the data that lets us know what actions we need to take. If the economy continues to explode, as it has in the past, maybe it will again. We don't know. I mean, some people are saying stock market's going to go higher. Then we can look at the data and make those decisions at that time, and not rely on and I would say give everybody on our team a raw deal by saying, look, I saw in the news that there's these indicators in the stock market that there's going to be a recession. So even barring our own internal data, we're going to lower the amount of raises that we're going to give you based off this maybe thing happening. And another thing that you said, which is everybody should remember, it's cash in the bank, cash in the bank, cash in the bank, right?
Yeah.
Profit and loss sheets are for pride, budgets are for whatever, but cash in the bank is how you actually keep score. And the more cash you can have, of course, you want to make sure that if something happens, that somebody can't sue you and take all of your cash. So you want to make sure it's appropriately put. But it's cash in the bank that the business has access to. And with this changing economy and the changing interest rates, it's no longer lines of credit because money's not cheap anymore. It's
Yeah.
actual cash in the bank. So I want to thank you, Dan, for taking the time to talk to me. I want to thank everybody for joining us for the Business Blueprint. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll do our best to try to get the authors and the books that we discussed during this episode into the chat as well. So you guys can read those books. They're amazing books. And I know I'm personally always looking for books to read. And join us next time and subscribe so that you can stay up to date on the things that we're learning as we learn them. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.